Chapter 61. Increasing Murderous Intent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jian Chen quickly moved through the grass. The light wind sword had already become a streak of white light. He slashed out with his sword at a rapid speed in several directions, his swordplay fast yet sharp. Following Jian Chen's quick movements, the wind scattered dry leaves into the air, fluttering around Jian Chen like gentle dancing butterflies. And at this moment, Jian Chen's swordplay suddenly changed. Although his sword techniques were still fast, but with every stab he made with his sword, the air whistled and left an afterimage that no ordinary person would be able to see easily. A moment after, the rapidly dancing sword in Jian Chen's hand suddenly stopped. But despite after such a long period of intense exercise, he did not even look out of breath and was instead still breathing normally. And at the same time, Jian Chen finally stopped his wild dance. The leaves that were all previously flying around him disintegrated into powder and scattered onto the ground. Only a few leaves were left completely intact, but written on some of them was the word sword. Although the size was different on each of them, it was written clearly and covered the entire area on each leaf. Although, there were some other leaves with the word sword on it that had missing strokes, being either unclear or incomplete. If anyone else saw this sight, then they would surely be amazed to the point of having to pick up their jaw from the ground. This scene was far too astonishing to believe, since the leaves had been floating wildly through the air and even weaved with other leaves at random intervals. Just focusing on one leaf amid the mess of them, constantly changing positions in the air would definitely cause a person to become dizzy. It would have been even more impossible to think that someone had been able to clearly write the word sword on any of them. Most importantly, the leaves were very fragile and liable to break upon the gentlest of touch. To use a sword to achieve such a feat without leaving a single trace of a tear, was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If people were to find out about what Jian Chen had done, then his name and prestige would be announced and known to the entire Tianyuan continent in the shortest period of time. Watching the still intact leaves gently float down to the ground with a happy smile, Jian Chen muttered to himself, although my speed with a sword has deteriorated, my control over it has greatly improved to a level that can't even compare to my past. It's almost as if the sword has become an integral part of my body. Perhaps this is the advantage of this world saint weapon. Jian Chen's ears suddenly detected a sound. Concentrating on the source, Jian Chen turned towards the opening of the grove while willing his silver sword to fade away. In a short amount of time, the place where Jian Chen looked at started to shake even more before a bloodied figure with a ripped uniform came scurrying out of it. Just one look at the clothes of the person and Jian Chen automatically knew that this was a student of Kargath Academy. But for what reason why the student was bloody all over, Jian Chen was puzzled. There were no magical beasts around, so there was no reason why he would be so injured. Kargath Academy also had strict rules about fighting among students. While giving each other's pointers was allowed, fights that could lead to fatal injuries were not allowed. However, when Jian Chen looked at the student's face, he immediately became stunned. His face froze in a hard expression as he looked at the amount of blood that covered half of the student's face. Jian Chen couldn't believe what he saw, so he opened his mouth to cry out. "Big brother!" came the astonished shout. In a flash, he crossed over 30 meters to arrive at his blood-soaked and injured brother with worry etched on his face. Seeing the horrible wound on Changyang Hu as well as the blood still flowing from his head, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed in anger. "Big brother, what happened to you? Who did this to you?" An intense murderous intent was emitted from his body the longer he looked at his injured brother. When it came to his brother Changyang Hu, he was the only person Jian Chen had actually cared about after his mother, because Changyang Hu had treated him like a true younger brother, so Jian Chen had wanted to repay him for this debt. When he had first come to Kargath Academy, it was Changyang Hu who had brought him on a tour around the academy grounds and explained the rules to him. He faced huge amounts of danger after running into the magical beast forest to fight and kill a Class 1 magical beast to gift Jian Chen its monster core without any regard for his own personal health. Although Class 1 magical beasts weren't even a threat to Jian Chen, Changyang, who did not have as much fighting experience or combat skills as Jian Chen. At the time, Changyang who only had the strength of a peak 10th Saint Force layer cultivator, so obtaining a Class 1 monster core wouldn't have been an easy task for him. Later on, his brother had even fought against Ka Diyun for him on the platform even after knowing his own strength was lacking in comparison to his opponent, initiating the challenge. Jian Chen had clearly felt that Changyang who cared for him from the bottom of his heart, and so from then on, Jian Chen had always treated him like close family. In his previous life, Jian Chen was a war orphan who had his parents murdered by the enemy army. From his birth, he had no family or friends and never knew the warm embrace of family. But now that God had arranged such a nice life for him, Jian Chen would definitely treasure this, and Changyang who held the second biggest spot in his heart after his mother by Yuntian. So seeing Changyang who beaten into such a state, Jian Chen's heart flew into a rage that was unprecedented. A single look from him gave the feeling that it could injure someone. Seeing Jian Chen suddenly appear, Changyang who looked at him with a dazed expression. However, his face changed once more as he spoke anxiously, "Fourth brother, why are you here? Hurry up and run. Leave this place, they'll be here in a moment." Changyang who looked impatient, he hadn't thought that he would run into Jian Chen here. Instead of running, Jian Chen's face darkened as he said in a low voice, "Big brother, who in the world beat you to such a state?" The suppressed rage in his tone could have been identified by anyone. Changyang whose hands desperately grabbed onto Jian Chen's body as he continued to speak urgently, "Fourth brother, don't bother asking about that right now and leave this place immediately. Take the long route back to the academy, or else they'll definitely find you." Although he knew Jian Chen's strength was enormous since he had beaten a middle saint, Changyang who did not believe that even Jian Chen could take on a dozen saints, along with Qing Mingxiang, who was an upper saint. But Jian Chen stood right where he was, like a stone statue that could not be budged. No matter what Changyang who did, nothing would sway Jian Chen. With eyes that spoke volumes of his murderous intent, he glared at the grove, waiting for someone to come out. A dozen uniformed students eventually walked into his range of sight, with Luo Jian and Qing Mingxiang walking in front of the group. When they saw Jian Chen, Qing Mingxiang's and Luo Jian's expressions became excited. With a big smile, Luo Jian said, "Changyang Xiang Tian, we found you at last. I was beginning to wonder where you had run off to." Without any need for instructions, the group of people immediately surrounded Jian Chen and his brother in a circle. Seeing how he and his brother were surrounded, Changyang whose face grew ugly and gave a small sigh. But other than that, he said nothing. Despite the arrogant manner of the people around him, Jian Chen did not look scared at all, and instead remained calm. It was almost as if he had not even noticed such weak people were surrounding him at all. Jian Chen's face hardened as his eyes swept across the faces of the people around him. Some of them had pained looks on their faces, they felt a chill well up in their hearts, as if Jian Chen's stare was a cold blade that had penetrated their souls. "Who was the one who beat my brother?" Jian Chen shouted, "Step forward." Immediately, a large amount of force was released into the air. Despite the dozen members in front of him, Jian Chen was not scared, and instead held his head up high as a sign of his determination to not give up. Jian Chen's powerful command was accompanied by the release of a strong qi, causing all of them to take an instinctive step backwards. After all, Jian Chen had already been baptized with murderous intent, and the children in front of him who still had the smell of their mother's milk on them would not be able to stand up against it. Realizing that he had been intimidated by Jian Chen's command, Qing Mingxiang became angry. He had thought that with his majestic upper saint strength, it would be him that would be doing the intimidation. He couldn't accept the reverse outcome. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you're seeking death right now." Qing Mingxiang snarled. The fiery red sword appeared in his hands, and gave off a searing red glow as it struck out towards Jian Chen's chest. Humph! Seeing the stab of the sword, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with strong murderous intent. His light wind sword immediately appeared in his right hand, parrying the stab from the other sword as fast as lightning. Ding! A crisp sound rang out as the two swords clashed. Both points of the swords had somehow pressed against each other. Seeing how the 2 points of the sword made contact with each other, Qing Mingxiang's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe such an event had happened. Even if Jian Chen was his opponent, having the 2 points of the sword meet as both swordsmen stabbed out wasn't something any normal person could replicate, especially considering the difference in size between their 2 swords, and the speed at which they had thrust their swords forward. And to be able to do it so flawlessly, this was not the sign of a weak person, it signified that a person's saint weapon control had far surpassed that of a typical saint. However, Jian Chen, who had only recently broken through sainthood, had easily achieved such a feat. This made Qing Mingxiang skeptical. He had thought that this was a coincidence, but the moment he saw Jian Chen's calm face, his heart immediately dispelled any notions of it being one. Another thing that had startled Qing Mingxiang was the sword in Jian Chen's hands. Because the sword had been so tiny in comparison to his, he had thought it was merely an embroidery needle. It was 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide, so it looked quite frail in his eyes. It looked as if the moment a large amount of strength was exerted onto it, the weapon would snap in half. Qing Mingxiang could swear that in his entire history of living, this was the first time he had ever seen such a sword. Within the Tian Yuan continent, every single saint had a saint weapon that leaned towards a great broadsword, since they had all condensed their saint force into heavy dot-type weapons. This convention was a fact that was commonly accepted by almost every single cultivationist. If Jian Chen's delicately small sword wasn't able to block against his attack, then Qing Mingxiang definitely would have ridiculed Jian Chen. Chapter 62. Jian Chen's Strength. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Qing Mingxiang's face hardened. This time, although opponent was only a newly broken through saint, he was facing his opponent seriously for the first time. Qing Mingxiang, since you've beaten my big brother, then don't expect to leave from this place unharmed. Jian Chen stated coldly. Qing Mingxiang snorted in response and said, Changyang Xiang Tian, I admit I've underestimated you, but if you want to beat me with your new saint powers, that won't be possible. Jian Chen snorted as he looked on at Qing Mingxiang with disdain. Whether or not I have the ability to, come and see. Jian Chen immediately rushed forward. His wrist perfectly controlled the light wind sword and escaped the deadlock with Qing Mingxiang's own sword by slapping the side of Qing Mingxiang's sword fiercely. Clang! As the sounds of metal rang in the air, Qing Mingxiang's sword was forced off to the sides by the light wind sword. Jian Chen had struck out with his sword with such force that Qing Mingxiang's sword arm had become numb with pain. At the same time, Jian Chen was in the air, stabbing the light wind sword like a streak of silver light towards Qing Mingxiang's chest. Qing Mingxiang turned pale with fright. Jian Chen's speed was nearly too quick for him to keep up with. He could only watch as the silver blade approached him with an inconceivable speed, unable to react or even move out of the way. The light wind sword tore through Qing Mingxiang's uniform and immediately sunk into his chest. But with Jian Chen's superior control, the sword did not sink in too deep. Immediately after feeling the sharp pain in his chest, Qing Mingxiang immediately retreated, causing Jian Chen's sword to be pulled out. Qing Mingxiang looked down to where the blood was dripping down onto his uniform with a terrified look. He replayed the moment over and over in his head. He had been unable to dodge the sword at all. In his entire life, he could swear that this was the fastest swordplay he had ever seen. He had even started to feel terrified at Jian Chen's strength, but he just couldn't understand how a newly advanced saint could be this strong. Jian Chen didn't plan on letting him off too lightly though. Immediately using profound steps, he took off like a demon possessed, and with another flash of his silver light, Jian Chen struck out at Qing Mingxiang's chest with great speed. Ah! Qing Mingxiang let out a miserable shout as he saw blood spray out once more. The blood from the left side of his chest had started to spread over to his right side. The wound was so deep that the bone underneath could be seen as the blood inside his body violently bubbled out, staining the entire top half of his uniform with it. The fury in Jian Chen's eyes didn't dissipate at all as he brandished his light wind sword and inflicted wound after wound upon Qing Mingxiang's body. The wounds on Qing Mingxiang steadily increased, each one looking even more frightening than the one before while going deep into the body. Not only was his body being sliced at, but his entire academy uniform had already started to fall apart, and the remaining cloth becoming redder by the second. Seeing how their strongest member Qing Mingxiang was powerless under Jian Chen, the dozen other students became as quiet as wooden chickens. Seeing how Qing Mingxiang was endlessly screaming, this had completely overturned what they had thought about him as they looked on with a stunned expression. Luo Jian reacted first, even though he was equally amazed at the display of strength Jian Chen was showing. He had at least 10 other companions who were all at the saint level. With a great increase in courage, he roared, "Everybody charge, even if he's strong, he's still just one person. How could we be afraid of just a single person?" Luo Jian raised his green greatsword with a snarl as he charged towards Jian Chen. Hearing Luo Jian's speech, the students all jolted back to awareness. With a look at one another, the fear that was planted into their hearts by Jian Chen was immediately cast out. With a lift of their great swords, battle-axe, large knives and spears, each student charged at Jian Chen with great arrogance. Jian Chen's eyes flashed as he watched the people come forward, but he didn't retreat. Taking the initiative and charging in with his light wind sword, he immediately stabbed toward the closest person's stomach. Jian Chen's sword slid into the student's body with ease. Against him, these students had no battle experience, so there was no way they'd be able to fight back. "Herc! Go die!" At that moment, Jian Chen had entered the encirclement. Jian Chen sneered, and the light wind sword emitted a slight glow as traces of sharp and powerful sword qi began to spread out from the blade. Jian Chen's right hand seemed to turn into a mirage, as the light wind blade seemed to pierce all four directions as fast as lightning. Every time he thrust his sword out, he could accurately hit another weapon. After only a short amount of time, Jian Chen had already lashed his sword out 10 times. Ding, ding, ding. A symphony of metal against metal sounds rang out, the sounds all merging together as one. When the light wind sword in Jian Chen's hand collided with the saint weapons, the expressions of all the surrounding students that were all middle saints changed. They immediately retreated, the saint weapons in their hands shaking from the collision. Jian Chen's sword appeared to be extremely small, but it hid a great amount of power behind it. After a single collision with his sword, the saint weapons all vibrated so intensely from the aftershock that it made the students' arms numb. While blocking all of the attacks, Jian Chen's expression didn't change. His movements did not pause at all, and his feet left traces in the ground as he used monster-like movements to charge through the group of people. The light wind sword in his hand danced around in the air at high speeds, turning into a silver glow. The light made it look like there were millions of sword afterimages freezing in the air, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Ah! Ah! With Jian Chen's monster-like movements, sharp shouts of pain rang out in the air. The desolate cries could make any weaker-hearted people absolutely horrified, and a chilliness began to arise in the air. The blood-covered Changyang, who stood on the side, staring in a daze at the Jian Chen constantly moving about like a demon, causing the students to cry out in shock. At the moment, his mind had already completely ground to a halt, he had already completely lost his cognitive abilities. At that moment, the dozens of students had already all fallen to the ground. Their ashen faces were filled with pain, and their originally perfectly clean and tidy uniforms were now torn all over the place. Each tear was dripping with blood, dyeing their entire uniforms crimson. Moreover, that white light continuously flashed over their bodies, quickly increasing the number of wounds on their bodies. From their upper torso down to their legs, their entire bodies were covered with frightening wounds. Their blood flowed like rivers out from their injuries, and they quickly began to look like they were made of blood. Jian Chen circled the students at high speeds. The light wind sword in Jian Chen's hand slashed at their bodies continuously, causing splashes of blood and torn pieces of clothing to fly out in the air. Chang Yanghu's injuries greatly affected Jian Chen's emotions. Although Jian Chen didn't kill these dozens of students, he would definitely not let them go lightly. If these people weren't attending the same school as Jian Chen was, and if Jian Chen wasn't worried about stirring trouble within their families, he would definitely end their lives without hesitation. Senior Changyang Xiang Tian, please have mercy on us. We won't dare to do this ever again. Senior Changyang Xiang Tian, please let us go this time. We won't ever do it again. Finally, the people could no longer endure the torture, and had begun to beg for mercy. As soon as one person began to cry out, the others all started to plead for their lives as well. However, a few of the more temperamental people were still gritting their teeth and holding themselves back. They had also considered running, but both their legs and arms were currently sporting terrifying wounds. The slightest movement caused them to bite down in pain. There was no way they could run, at the least, they didn't have the willpower to endure such an intense pain. Jian Chen ceased his movements. His expression was cold and indifferent, he didn't have a hint of blush on his cheeks, and his breathing was calm. However, the light wind sword in his hand was dripping with fresh blood. Jian Chen's body was as tall and straight as a mountain, immovable in his spot. His eyes flashed coldly as if they seemed to be able to pierce through one's soul. He slowly swept his gaze across the dozen students lying on the ground and said, I can let you guys go, but you have to answer this, who injured my older brother? It's Lord Cheng, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun. Right, it was those three that had injured Chang Yanghu. Chang Yanghu was wounded by those three, we didn't do anything at all. The dozen youths struggled to say their excuses first, afraid that if they were too slow in their responses, Jian Chen would be discontent. At the moment, they had already long abandoned any thoughts of retaliation against Jian Chen, and wholeheartedly regretted their actions. Among them, half of the people had had their monster cores taken away by Jian Chen in the forest. The other half had no enmity towards Jian Chen, and had merely been gathered by Qing Mingxiang. Jian Chen's eyes flashed fiercely. He coldly glared at Qing Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun, a powerful murderous intent evident in his gaze. Under Jian Chen's murderous gaze, Qing Mingxiang and the other two felt chills in their hearts, and all showed terrified expressions. Chapter 63. Incoming Disaster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Changyang Xiang Tian, what are you going to doing? Let us go immediately, let's forget about the events that happened today, otherwise, just you wait for my Huayun sect to come for revenge. Qing Mingxiang said sternly. Even an idiot could tell with one look that Jian Chen didn't plan on letting them go that easily. Right now, Qing Mingxiang wanted nothing else but to leave this place and plot his revenge for another day. Jian Chen sneered, let you go. It won't be that easy. Hearing this, Qing Mingxiang and the two others' face dropped. Ka Diyun spoke with a gloomy voice, Changyang Xiang Tian, we may have injured your brother, but now you have injured us, let us wipe the slate clean. Jian Chen slowly walked towards the three with his light wind sword emitting sword qi. The three watched as the sword slowly enveloped itself in a bright glow of silver as if it was being eaten by it. A clean slate. How could it be that easy? Today, you three will leave an arm behind, and if there is another time in the future, then it will be your life. Jian Chen had already arrived in front of Ka Diyun, his light wind sword already swishing down in an arc like silver lightning towards Ka Diyun's shoulder. Ah! Ka Diyun let out a desolate scream as the intense feeling of pain racked his face. Already all color had drained away from it. A fountain of blood sprayed out of the stump from where his right arm originally was as it flopped down onto the ground lifeless. Jian Chen had chopped off Ka Diyun's right arm. Qing Mingxiang and Luo Jian's face immediately changed as they watched with a tremble. Another look at the severed arm, and then at Ka Diyun's screaming figure had caused them to become deathly white in the face. The 10 other students looked at Jian Chen with fear. This type of development was something they were not expecting to see. Who would have known that he was this merciless and severed someone's arm without hesitation? This cruel display had brought them no small amount of anxiety and fear. But there was a small shimmer of hope. They had fortunately not fought against Chang Yonghu. If it were not for that small fact, then they had no doubt that they would be joining Luo Jian, Qing Mingxiang, and Ka Diyun amongst the ranks of losing an arm. Jian Chen had treated the event as if it was an insignificant matter, his face not revealing any emotion whatsoever during the act. Whether it was the splattered blood on the ground or Ka Diyun's screams of pain, it had no effect on him. Instead, he looked at Luo Jian and walked closer towards him with his bloody sword. As Jian Chen approached, fear filled Luo Jian's face. Ignoring the pain from his wounds, he began to crawl backwards away from Jian Chen at a snail-like pace while crying, "Changyang Xiang Tian, what are you doing? Don't come any closer." Jian Chen kept his slow pace as he walked towards Luo Jian. With an icy stare that revealed no mercy in his eyes, he slowly raised his light wind sword. Seeing Jian Chen lift his silver sword, Luo Jian became even more terrified. He had long since lost his arrogant attitude and started to plead to him, "Changyang Xiang Tian, please that I beg of you. Please don't cut off my arm. If you let me go, Luo Jian, swear that in the future I will definitely repay you." Jian Chen showed no signs of stopping. Swinging his sword in another arc of silver light, he swiftly cut off Luo Jian's arm under the owner's disbelieving eye. Ah! A terrified scream came out from Luo Jian as his right arm was separated from his shoulder, causing blood to come spraying out onto the ground. "Changyang Xiang Tian, I definitely won't let you go." Luo Jian grimaced as he used his anger to roar in anger. Already his eyes became bloodshot as he stared at Jian Chen with intense hatred. Jian Chen didn't take any notice of Luo Jian's cry, and instead walked off towards Qing Mingxiang. Qing Mingxiang's face was still a deathly white color. There was only regret in his heart as he realized his strength was weaker than Jian Chen's. If it weren't for the fact that he had a dozen other people at the saint level, he wouldn't have been forced into such a difficult situation. Seeing the still approaching figure of Luo Jian, Qing Mingxiang couldn't quell the feeling of absolute dread in his heart as he tried to calm down. "Changyang Xiang Tian, if you don't want to bring your clan into this." Hearing Qing Mingxiang's words immediately caused a reaction from Jian Chen. A glare appeared on his eyes as he immediately flashed forward to where Qing Mingxiang was. Before he could even finish his sentence, Jian Chen had already lopped off his right arm. Qing Mingxiang stifled a shout as his face flashed with pain. He was not like Ka Diyun or Luo Jian who had both screamed. The scream of pain had already been suppressed in his throat, but his face was still warped into a different expression. It would seem that his pain threshold was greater than the other two. Jian Chen's ice-cold gaze landed on the three people and he coldly said, "Today, I cut off your arm, but if there's a next time, I will take your life. Don't think I am bluffing, I will be true to my word." Jian Chen's eyes swept over to where the other students laid. As he looked at each student, they stared down at the ground in fear. Whenever Jian Chen had looked at them with his bloody sword, none of them had even the smallest idea of trying to get revenge. Jian Chen looked at his bloody light wind sword, and with a single thought, he held the sword with the point facing downwards. All of the blood accumulated on the sword started to accumulate at the tip of the sword and slowly started to drip down onto the dusty earth, restoring the light wind sword to its original bright glory. With the light wind sword finally clean, Jian Chen returned to where Chang Yonghu was. After seeing his bloody brother, the icy stare on Jian Chen's face softened as he said with concern, "Big brother, let's go back now." Chang Yonghu nodded his head dumbfounded. Right now his eyes were wide open after watching the entire fight that had just happened. Even though he had personally witnessed Jian Chen's victory, he was still having a hard time in believing it. Jian Chen lent a hand towards the bloody Chang Yonghu and the both turned around to walk back to his dorm by a secluded road. But despite this, the both of them would still see enough people that would spread the news that Chang Yanghu was heavily injured around the academy. Not long after Jian Chen had returned back to his room, the students lent a hand towards the 3 injured students and began their slow walk towards the academy. The moment the academy came into sight, everyone went into an uproar, especially for the 3 students each missing an arm. Nobody could believe their eyes at what they had seen. The news of the injured students spread across the academy with rapid speed. The news had even spread to the teachers, who immediately reported it to the vice headmaster Bai Yan. When Bai Yan had heard that Qing Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun had their arms cut off, he placed extra importance on the matters and immediately relayed them to the medical experts of the academy. As Bai Yan arrived at the medicinal wing of the academy, a large group of people had already gathered on the outside as they clamored around for news. Vice Headmaster Chang Bai-en pushed aside the crowd of students, and directly forced his way up to the medicinal wing to see the situation. There were currently a dozen blood-covered students lying on stretchers. In the middle of the room stood 2 middle-aged men and a woman currently closing their eyes. They had their hands spread out above 3 of the students, emitting a milky white light from their hands that enveloped these students. Shrouded in milky white rays of light, the 3 students' terrifying wounds were being quickly sealed before their very eyes. The speed of the healing was unfathomably fast, and within a short breath, the 3 students' wounds had already disappeared without a trace. Once the wounds disappeared, the expressions on the 3 students' faces clearly changed. Now they showed no traces of pain, on the contrary, they looked a lot more relaxed now. At the same time, one could see traces of alarm in the depths of their eyes. After treating the 3 students, the 2 men and 1 woman showed their humble appreciation to Bai Yan. Soon after, they continued to treat the remaining dozen or more students in the middle. The vice headmaster had an ugly expression on his face as his gaze swept across the dozen students. His gaze lingered for an especially long time on Qing Mingxiang and the other 2 that had lost their right arms. His expression fell as he bellowed, "What happened here? Who wounded you to this extent? Could it be that you encountered someone from outside? Humph, don't they know that everything within this 100-kilometer perimeter is Kargath Academy's territory? To think that someone would dare to enter Kargath Academy and injure its students, this is really absurd." Bai Yan was fuming. It was very obvious that he thought that Qing Mingxiang and the other dozen students had been hurt by some people from the outside. "Vice Headmaster, it was Changyang Xian Tian, we were all injured by Changyang Xian Tian," a student weakly cried. "That's right, Vice Headmaster, you have to demand justice for us. Changyang Xiang Tian not only heavily injured us, but he even cut off the arms of Lord Cheng and the 2 others. Vice Headmaster." Bai Yan was completely shocked into a daze by these words. He only felt disbelief. Among these dozen students, the weakest person was at least a lower saint. There were even some middle saints, and 1 upper saint among them. With such a lineup, even if they encountered a great saint, they would still definitely be able to overwhelm him. He really couldn't believe that so many people had actually been beaten black and blue by a freshman that had only just broken through saint level a few days ago. Bai Yan couldn't accept this fact at all. After confirming what actually happened, Bai Yan's expression immediately grew serious. His heart had already sank to the utmost degree. He immediately looked for the headmaster. What happened here was far too complicated for Bai Yan to resolve. After Bai Yan recounted the entire situation to the headmaster lost his calm. He jumped up from his chair with an expression of utter shock and said, "What? Is what you said really true? Qing Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun all had their arms cut off by Changyang Xiang Tian?" "Yes, headmaster, I personally made a trip to see. The 3 individuals' arms were indeed cut off," said Bai Yan solemnly. "AI." The headmaster sighed heavily and said, "This time the situation has worsened. This Changyang Xiang Tian is far too impulsive. Ka Di clan and Luo clan are of no problem, however, Huayun sect is not someone the Changyang clan can afford to offend. Headmaster, what should we do now?" Our Jessen kingdom had much difficulty producing a genius like Changyang Xiang Tian. We can't just stand by and watch a genius with limitless potential die when he had not yet finished maturing. Otherwise, this would really be too major a loss for Jessen kingdom. Vice Headmaster Bayan said in a heavy tone. Chapter 64. Goodbye Changbai. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The headmaster murmured quietly, what you said is correct, Changyang Xiang Tian must be protected. Bayan, you stay here and resolve the matters in the medicinal building, I will go to the Changyang clan immediately. Otherwise, if we were to wait for the experts of the Huayun sect to arrive, the situation will become too terrible. After, the headmaster walked towards the frame of the window and jumped out of it. Then just like a big bird, he immediately flew into the sky with frightening speed and flew off into the horizon. Seeing the headmaster disappear into the horizon, Bayan let loose a sigh. Changyang Xiang Tian has really disturbed the peace this time. If he had only just beaten them, then the situation wouldn't be that bad, but he had to go and cut off Qing Mingxiang's arm. Although it's not like the arm can't be reattached, but the strength needed for this is too high. Even the Huayun sect cannot invite a rank 7, Radiant Saint Master with ease. By this point, the entire academy had heard about the 3 students who had their arms chopped off by Changyang Xiang Tian. It was the topic of discussion amongst every student, and with that, Changyang Xiang Tian's strength had created another shock between the teachers and students. While the academy was talking about that, Jian Chen sat cross-legged on his bed as he began to reflect upon his actions. He knew in his heart that by chopping off the arms of Qing Mingxiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Di Yun, he had brought upon a great deal of trouble on himself. However, he didn't regret what he had done at all, so all he could do right now was ponder deeply on how he could deal with the wrath of the 3 groups. The day went by quickly and soon became night time. Dong dong dong. A loud knocking sound came from the other side of Jian Chen's room. Hearing the sound, the cross-legged Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes. Looking down to see the various Class 1 monster cores without energy, he sighed silently before looking towards the door. Who is it? Changyang Xiang Tian, this is Vice Headmaster Chang Bayan. Came Bayan's familiar voice from outside the door. Jian Chen immediately got off his bed and walked over to open the door. Vice Headmaster Chang Bayan was standing right outside his door, with an unsightly expression. Vice Headmaster, what's wrong? Jian Chen asked in a conversational tone. He already guessed what the Vice Headmaster had come for, but his heart was still extremely calm and unwavering. Vice Headmaster Chang Bayan glanced at Jian Chen with a complicated look and sighed, Changyang Xiang Tian, please pack up, then immediately follow me to the headmaster's office. Oh. Jian Chen indifferently replied. He did not say anything afterwards, and quietly went back to his room to pack up his things. Jian Chen didn't have many belongings, he grabbed some of his own medicines and stored them into his space belt. Then he followed Bayan to the center of the academy where the single, lone tower stood. Ah, look over there, isn't that Changyang Xiang Tian? It is, looks like he's walking together with the vice headmaster. Maybe he received a super strict punishment. As they walked through the sports field, a crowd of students started to gather and chatter amongst themselves. Jian Chen turned a deaf ear to the discussions that had arisen around him. He followed behind Vice Headmaster Bayan, and they soon arrived at the central tower, and directly entered the headmaster's office. Right next to the vice headmaster's table sat 2 elders. One of them was a relieved headmaster while the other elder was wearing a cyan-colored pao and had long black hair that was tied back. From behind the desk, the old man looked quite ordinary, just like any other old man. Headmaster, Changyang Xiang Tian has been brought. Vice headmaster greeted politely. Hearing this, the headmaster's gaze immediately settled onto Jian Chen, and he said in a calm voice, Bayan, you may leave. Yes sir. Bayan quickly left. At that moment, the only people left inside the office were Jian Chen and Kargath Academy's headmaster, as well as an elder in a blue/green robe. Ever since Jian Chen first entered, his line of vision had been fixed on the blue/green clad elder. This elder wasn't any stranger to Jian Chen, it was Changyang clan's butler, Chang Bai. Chang Bai, why have you come? Jian Chen said while looking at the elder. Chang Bai gave a complicated look at Jian Chen before sighing, "Fourth Master, from all of your days at Kargath Academy, we have been watching you and your achievements. Whether it be your mother or father, they both feel extremely proud, but this act of yours today was too impulsive." Jian Chen naturally understood what Chang Bai was saying, and said firmly, "Chang Bai, I don't regret anything. They brought this onto themselves. My older brother hadn't offended them in any way, but they still heavily injured him. Even if I relived this experience, I would still do the same thing." Chang Bai sighed, "Fourth Master, I don't disagree with your methods. After all, in the Tian Yuan continent, it is strength that rules over others. Although their strength was weaker than yours, you did not think about the powers they had backing them up. If it was just the Ka Di clan or Luo clan, then our Changyang clan would not have much trouble with dealing with them, but Cheng Mingxiang is the treasured son of the Huayun sect's leader. The Huayun sect holds the biggest amount of power in the Jessan kingdom after the royal family, so this is a power the Changyang clan cannot afford to provoke. Changyang Xiang Tian, the Huayun sect's strength is quite formidable. Although they aren't as powerful as the royal family, even the royal family is afraid of any consequences from meddling with them. Currently, among the top 6 experts in Jessan Kingdom, the Huayun sect alone takes up 2 of those spots." The headmaster said with a serious expression. Jian Chen's expression also gradually grew more serious at these words. At that moment, a light knock came from outside the door. A respectful voice rang out from outside, "Respected headmaster, Changyang Hu has been brought. Enter." The headmaster said. The door opened, and a teacher walked in leading Changyang Hu. Changyang Hu was currently wearing a new academy uniform, but scars still clearly covered his face. "Chang Bai." Changyang Hu yelled the moment he walked in, he was unable to contain his emotions as he spoke with astonishment. Gnav Om, the teacher, didn't enter the headmaster's office. After sending Changyang Hu in, and sending the headmaster his respects, he lightly closed the door and left. Chang Bai's eyes lingered onto the scar on Changyang Hu's face, his pair of ordinary-looking eyes finally revealed some fury in them. Without any other external movements, he spoke, "Eldest master, you've suffered greatly." Changyang Hu shook his head without any mind, and said, "It's just a bit of injury, nothing major." "However, Chang Bai, why did you come to the academy?" Changyang Hu asked in confusion. Chang Bai's face didn't react in the slightest, and instead said gently, "Eldest master, fourth master, you should go pick up the rest of your things." Jian Chen quietly nodded without saying a word. "I've already packed everything, Chang Bai, did you come to take me away?" Changyang Hu asked in a reluctant tone. Chang Bai nodded, "Correct, I've come today to pick you 2 up and depart from the academy. It would be unwise for you 2 to continue living at Kargath Academy." Hearing this, Changyang Hu's expression became dark. He had spent quite a long time at Kargath Academy, and had already developed special feelings of attachment towards it. "Changyang Hu, Changyang Xiang Tian, you 2 should first head out, I still have a few things I want to discuss with Chang Bai," the headmaster said. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu didn't have any objections, and they immediately turned around to walk out of the headmaster's office. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu weren't kept waiting for long, Chang Bai came out from the headmaster's office soon after. However, when he looked at the 2, his face changed to one of happiness. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu followed Chang Bai down the tower, and got onto the flying dot-type magical beast to leave Kargath Academy. It directly flew up into the air, and began heading towards Lore City. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu didn't speak on the magical beast's back. While the two were being rushed home, the both of them seemed to be extremely heavy-hearted. Within Jian Chen's head, he couldn't help but to think about the motherly affections he had received. Although Jian Chen wasn't a kid in his mind, he had never dealt with such an experience before, and so this motherly affection was a new thing, so Jian Chen had a very low resistance towards this. In Jian Chen's mind, he could not help but recall his previous life in the Changyang household. His mother had been wholeheartedly caring towards him, and had loved him dearly every step of his life. This made Jian Chen's frozen heart, which had never experienced a mother's love before, become a sea of warmth, and he enjoyed and treasured this feeling. Time quietly passed as the Class 4 magical beast soared through the air at high speeds and caused the wind to constantly whistle in Jian Chen's ear. Jian Chen's black, waist-length hair was blown messily in the air as it danced in the wind. Especially now that he had a handsome and dashing appearance, he looked as confident as ever as he rode on top of the flying magical beast with ease. The flying magical beast crossed over many different villages and cities under the guise of the pitch-dark skies. After a few hours of flying 1,000 kilometers above the ground, they finally arrived at Lore City. Under the control of Chang Bai, the eagle beast descended onto the grounds of the Changyang mansion. The servants who managed the rear courts had long since left the area, leaving behind only the most loyal of guardsmen. A large gust of wind descended upon the courtyards as the eagle beast came down from the skies and landed onto the ground as the three males climbed down from it. A group of people had already gathered around the eagle beast with a middle-aged man wearing a black and white pao leading the group. This was the master of Changyang Mansion and the father of Jian Chen, Changyang Ba. By his side were four very beautiful women, Jian Chen's mother Bai Yuntian and his three aunts. Standing by his fourth aunt's side was a girl who looked to be around 18 years old. This was his second sister he hadn't seen in a few months, Changyang Mingyue. Standing right next to her was another person who looked to be around Jian Chen's age, it was Changyang Ku, his third brother. However, in Changyang Ku's eyes was a look of mirth as if he was happy to see Jian Chen in such misery after leaving Kargath Academy. Standing behind the family were a few middle-aged men and elders. They were high-ranking members of the clan, but each one of them had a grave expression on their faces as they looked at Jian Chen with a complicated stare. Some looked at him with happiness, others with an expectant expression, and some who just sighed. Chang Bai walked towards Changyang Ba and gave a small smile. "Clan leader, I have not failed you. I have brought the eldest master and fourth master back home safely," he stated. Changyang Ba looked at Chang Bai and clasped his hands together. "Chang Bai, thank you very much for your trouble. Clan leader is being too courteous, this is just part of my duty," Chang Bai said. Changyang Ba swept his gaze across Jian Chen and Changyang Hu. His eyes held both expressions of gratification and admiration as he looked at Jian Chen, and his expression had also become excited, although it was still nevertheless worried. Finally, he let out a long sigh and said, "Xiang'er, Hu, both of you come with me to the main hall." Changyang Ba turned around and began to walk out. Chapter 65. The People from the Imperial Palace. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu returned to their respective mother's side and walked with the others towards the main hall of the Changyang mansion. Hu, you've suffered greatly at the academy, just look at your scars." On the way, Jian Chen's eldest aunt, Ling Long, looked at the scars on Changyang Hu's face with eyes wet with tears that never seemed to cease. Changyang Hu could only laugh as he replied, "Mother, these are only small injuries, nothing to worry about. It was a good thing fourth brother found me, otherwise, your child would have been left unable to even move from bed." Hearing this, Ling Long turned her head to look at Jian Chen with a gentle smile on her face. "Xiangtian, I really must thank you for helping Hu." Jian Chen smiled back, "Eldest aunt, what are you saying? If my big brother has a problem, of course I'd help. Besides, this happened because of me and big brother was caught up into it. As long as eldest aunt doesn't blame me, then I be happy enough." Ling Long still had a smile on her face. Xiangtian, you're becoming more and more intelligent. You're almost becoming just like Ah Hu now. Praise from eldest aunt. Jian Chen laughed. He could clearly tell that eldest aunt Ling Long's attitude towards him had improved. She was no longer so solemn and unmoving towards him. No longer was she like before, always wearing a neutral face. Mother, you should say it right. Fourth brother's strength is really amazing. Before he was even a saint, he could easily hunt and kill class 2 magical beasts. And after he did become one, even the combined powers of the geniuses of cultivation of Kargath Academy, despite having the genius upper Saint Qing Mingxiang among their ranks, were beaten in under 3 minutes. The 10 other who followed them were also easily beaten up by fourth brother as well. Changyang, who was clearly excited, his voice was rising in volume as he spoke. Mother, you didn't see the fight, but I did. Although fourth brother was by himself, he had beaten a dozen people until they were covered with bruises in the blink of an eye. These dozen people were all at the rank of a saint at the very least, but against fourth brother, they were no match at all. Hearing this, Jian Chen's mother Bai Yuntian beamed with happiness as she looked at her son with loving affection. Humph! A cold sneer came from the side. It was from Jian Chen's third aunt Bai Yushuang, who continued to say, amazing is amazing, but it was this amazingness that provoked the Huayun sect. Changyang Xiangtian's amazingness is practically inviting danger to our Changyang mansion. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together. His third aunt Bai Yushuang had always treated him with prejudice since he was young. Jian Chen's mother, Bai Yuntian, was extremely discontent. However, the one that had caused trouble was her own son, and even she slightly felt that he was in the wrong. In addition, his relationship with Bai Yushuang was never good. Thus, she couldn't claim he wasn't guilty either, otherwise the little feud between the two would only grow. Forget it, third sister. What's happened has already happened. Discussing it now isn't of any use. What we should do now is to properly consider how we should deal with it. Jian Chen's second aunt Yu Fengyan explained. Forget it, third sister. After all, Xiangtian stirred up this trouble for the sake of saving Ah Hu. You can't blame everything on Xiangtian. Ling Long sided with Jian Chen. BDNV, seeing that there were actually 2 people supporting Jian Chen, Bai Yushuang could only snort and stay silent. Bai Yuntian sighed, her gaze held both love and worry as she looked at Jian Chen and said, Xiang'er, we know of all of your achievements at Kargath Academy. You are my pride and glory, but I also think that your actions this time were too brash. To think that you even cut off the Huyun sect leader's son's arm. Do you know that with this, you've not only caused major trouble for yourself, but you've also dragged the entire Changyang clan in with you as well. A trace of guilt was shown on Jian Chen's face as he said, Sorry mother, I have brought a great trouble to our clan. Xiangtian, what happened has already happened. You should stop blaming yourself. Right now we need to go to the main hall quickly to discuss how to settle this conflict. Second aunt then closed her mouth. After that, the group started to pick up their pace as they headed towards the main hall. At this moment within a splendid palace, the Emperor of Jessan Kingdom held a letter in the middle of his hands. Creasing together his eyebrows, he let out a long sigh before saying, This Changyang Xiangtian is truly too impulsive, he has made a great mistake by cutting off the right arm of the Huayun sect's Qing Mingxiang. This type of situation is something the Changyang clan cannot stand up against. The Emperor released the letter and watched it drop to the table. Servant, call the armored forces commander Bai Dao to come quickly. Yes, Your Majesty. As the Emperor gave out his command, the court eunuch hurried out to obey his orders. Soon enough, a black-armored middle-aged man came walking into the room. This man's appearance was rather ordinary-looking, but he had a resolute expression on his face. His eyes shined brightly below his scarred face. The scars ran across his entire forehead, causing people to jump at his terrifying appearance. The man walked towards the Emperor before stopping 10 meters away from him. Your Majesty, this servant knows not why he has been called here. The emperor slowly stood up as he grabbed the letter in his hand and handed it to the man. Take a look. Hearing this, the middle-aged male wearing black armor received the letter from the emperor and opened it to begin reading. After he finished, his expression had become extremely heavy. I hadn't imagined that he would actually stir up so much trouble. The black-armored man let out a long sigh as his expression became anxious. The younger generations always seem to be so arrogant and impulsive. The emperor sighed, Bai Dao, ever since you joined the armored forces 20 years ago, you've never returned back to your homeland. Take this opportunity today and visit. Yes, Your Majesty. A complex look flashed in the armored youth's eyes. The emperor's expression suddenly turned serious as he said, Bai Dao, when you return this time, you must persuade Changyang clan's people to send Changyang Xiangtian over here as quickly as possible. Otherwise, once the Huayun sect goes looking for them, the conflict will grow even more. Only by sending Changyang Xiangtian away, in addition to us mediating between them, will the conflict between the Changyang clan and the Huayun sect be temporarily stabilized. Right now, all of the neighboring nations are already beginning to stir. It seems that they've never let go of the idea of attacking my Jessan Kingdom's territory. At a moment as critical as this, nothing can be allowed to occur within the kingdom. Otherwise, the end result will be too horrible to even think about. Changyang Xiangtian is a genius from the heavens with unlimited potential. His future prospects truly cannot be measured, may be the only source of hope that Jessan Kingdom has ever had in the last few hundred years. For this reason, Changyang Xiangtian must be protected at all costs. Although we cannot guarantee his future achievements will go smoothly, we cannot allow him to get involved in an accident within our Jessan Kingdom. The emperor spoke with a hard face. Hearing this, the armored youth showed a proud and joyous expression. He suppressed the rising emotions within his heart and said, Young Majesty, Bai Dao understands what he should do now. The emperor nodded his head and said, Bai Dao, there's no time to lose. You must head out to Changyang Mansion immediately. With your strength, you should be able to arrive there before sunrise. Yes, Your Majesty. Within the great halls of the Changyang Mansion, Changyang Ba sat down onto his throne, with Jian Chen on one side and his fellow wives on the other side. Sitting a few steps below was the relieved housekeeper Chang Bai. Changyang Ba had a look of worry on his face as he looked at his son Jian Chen. Xiang'er's situation at Kargath Academy should be known to everyone here already. The Huayun sect leader's son had his right arm cut off, so the Huayun sect will definitely not let this matter go. Please offer up what solutions you may have. Hearing this, everyone in the hall went silent. The Huayun sect was the biggest force of power aside from the royal family in the Jessan Kingdom and didn't fear the emperor's power at all. The Changyang clan wouldn't be able to resist their sect since Cheng Mingxiang was like a treasured son of the sect leader. Since he was a genius that far exceeded the others, to have his arm chopped off by Jian Chen would definitely influence his future road of achievements. It could be said with no exaggeration that Jian Chen had completely destroyed Cheng Mingxiang. So for that reason everyone knew within their hearts that there would be no way for the Huayun sect to forgive this matter. Everyone was still silent before finally a 60-year-old elder said, the best way to solve this problem is to find and invite a Radiant Saint Master to help repair Cheng Mingxiang's arm. However, only a rank 7, Radiant Saint Master would have the power to do something on this level. Our Changyang clan would not be able to easily call on such a person. Not only that, but rank 7, Radiant Saint Masters are extremely rare within the Tian Yuan continent and many of them are wanderers. It would be easier to climb to the heavens than to find one, so the possibility of healing Cheng Mingxiang's arm is practically zero. What you're saying is correct. In my opinion, our only chance of appeasing the anger of the Huayun sect aside from finding a Radiant Saint Master is to have the Emperor and the royal family back us up. However, the Huayun sect would definitely not give up their chances. What is guaranteed is that the fourth master will not be easy to protect. A middle-aged person said. Standing by the middle-aged man were a few other elders who had high amounts of influence within the clan. They have long since heard about Jian Chen's achievements within the academy, and in their hearts, they had already started to place their hopes for the clan's survivals onto Jian Chen. So even though the clan was being troubled by a big problem, no one had blamed him for it and instead tried their best to find ways to protect him. Not only that, but with the arranged marriage between him and Princess Golan, then after the marriage, the Changyang clan would be able to rise higher in power. If only the ancestor was still here. An elder sighed helplessly. Hearing this, Changbai's eyes lit up. That's right, if the master was here, then our clan wouldn't need to assemble here today to figure out a solution. It's a shame, the master has already been gone for dozens of years without any notice. We don't even know if he is alive or not. The crowd went silent after hearing that. Jian Chen's heart pulsed after hearing Changbai talk. From his few years at the Changyang mansion, he had never once heard about this ancestor or Changbai's master come up as a topic before. Although he had only just heard about the two, he was sure in his heart that these two people were actually very strong and had power incomparable to anyone else. Most likely the two were not afraid of the Huayun sect and were former elders of the clan. Jian Chen didn't bother to think about his question long, and immediately dismissed it from his mind. Seeing how the hall was still silent, Jian Chen hesitated slightly before saying, "Father, it would be better for Changbai's eagle beast to send me out. As long as I do not remain within Changyang mansion, I am sure the Huayun sect will not act upon the clan if they truly do come." No, absolutely not. The moment Jian Chen spoke, Bai Yuntian and Changyang Ba's voices both simultaneously rose up in objection. Both of Bai Yuntian's hands tightly grasped onto Jian Chen's own hands as her eyes gradually became misty before tears started to stream down her face. She cried, "Xiang'er, don't say such foolish things. The Tianyuan continent is very dangerous, and it's not as easygoing as you think it is. You have not yet explored the world, so you don't know what rules must be followed in order to survive. Your strength is still too low, mother will definitely not let you go on such a foolish endeavor." Chapter 66. The People from the Imperial Palace, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. That's right, Xiang'er, what your mother said is correct. The world isn't as peaceful as the academy is, it's filled with slaughter. And with your current strength, being able to survive won't be that easy. Forget about this idea, I absolutely won't agree to it. Changyang Ba said seriously. Although he spoke in an ordinary tone, he had been firm in rejecting Jian Chen's idea. Jian Chen already knew that it would be hard to get his family to agree to this plan, but he continued to speak, "Father, mother, please don't worry about me. Your son may not be strong, but I am still able to protect myself. I've read many books from the Academy Library, and so I have some familiarity on how to survive within the Tianyuan continent. Once your child leaves Changyang Mansion, then that'll be one less problem for the clan. Fourth Master, the situation isn't as simple as you think. If the Huayun sect were to find out that you are no longer within the Changyang Mansion, then I'm afraid that they would send out many of their numbers to pursue you. And with the Huayun sect's power, you won't be hard to locate." A white-haired elder spoke. In his heart, he had placed Jian Chen as the hope for the clan's future, and definitely did not want to see him die prematurely. He was a 15-year-old saint who was stronger than an upper-level saint, and bordered along the powers of a great saint. This meant that he was a genius from the heavens that would shake the entire Tianyuan continent. To some of the men here, Jian Chen was no longer just a regular person, but a glowing human treasure that could give them boundless wealth. For that reason, within the hearts of the high-ranked elders, they all just wanted to protect Jian Chen so he wouldn't suffer a blow to his future potential. Jian Chen let loose a big smile. "Everyone doesn't need to worry, I've read up about a lot about the continent, so I'm sure that I can keep away from the Huayun sect's grasp." "Definitely not, Xiang'er. This is still too risky, it's not worth the trouble." Changyang Ba immediately shot down the proposal. "Xiang'er, don't worry about a thing. While the Huayun sect may be very strong, our Changyang clan won't be such an easy pushover, and although our ancestor has been gone for some years, his reputation is still widely known. The Huayun sect wouldn't dare to be so forward with our clan. So just stay within the mansion, I will do my best to protect you. Jian Chen inwardly sighed to himself. With such a resolute objection, there would be no way for him to convince his father otherwise. That's right, Xiang'er, this idea of yours is far too risky. Even if you could escape from the Huayun sect, the life of the Tianyuan continent is not as straightforward and simple as the books say. Please just obediently stay at Changyang Mansion, your father and your uncles will do their best to protect you. Bai Yuntian gently pleaded with Jian Chen. Cool. Changyang Ba cleared his voice, that's enough, let's first talk about how we'll deal with the Huayun sect. I'm sure they have already heard about this situation and will arrive at Lore City soon, so we are pressed for time. Changyang Ba stated once more. The entire crowd within the main hall went silent as they all started to think about the situation. If His Majesty helps us, then that means the arranged wedding between the fourth master and Princess Golan is still on. So in the end, the fourth master will still be the son-in-law to the emperor, so I'm sure His Majesty won't sit around and do nothing. Someone said. Chang Bai nodded his head in contemplation and said, if His Majesty wants to support us, then he could temporarily suppress this situation, but this will no doubt bring His Majesty quite a headache. It is unfortunate timing right now as well, the neighboring countries have been inconspicuously sending soldiers to the borders. Most likely, they want to invade the richly fertile lands of the Jessan Kingdom. So right now, His Majesty definitely would not want to get onto the bad side of the Huayun sect, after all, this is a matter of life or death for the kingdom. Without the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Huayun sect, even the strongest fighters would be hard-pressed to fight against the other kingdom soldiers. Although the fourth master has a very strong potential, and also has high expectations from His Majesty, the fourth master's future achievements currently cannot be confirmed. Not only that, but the fourth master is still young, so there is still a long time before he can fully mature. With the kingdom on the verge of a war, there is simply not enough time for them to wait around for the fourth master, since we're not sure how long it'll be before the kingdom either wins or loses. The kingdom will need as many strong saints as possible in order to help win the war, so it's not clear if His Majesty will help us or not. The people in the main hall continued to attempt to come up with other ways. However, despite having contemplated for an entire evening, they were still unable to come up with any workable method. The night flew by quickly under the strained atmosphere the dozen people were in. The sky had already begun to brighten, it was already close to dawn. After an entire night of discussion, everyone's expressions looked exhausted. At this moment, a Changyang clan patrolman came running in, reporting to the clan leader, there is a person named Bai Dao waiting outside the mansion who wishes to see you. Bai Dao. Changyang Ba exclaimed under his breath with a contemplative look. His eyes shined brightly as he stood up from his throne, quickly invite him in. Yes sir. The guard responded, and quickly left. Hearing the name of Bai Dao, Bai Yuntian started to tremble from where she was standing with a look of happiness. But soon that look changed into one of puzzlement. Jian Chen became confused as he noticed the change in his mother's expression. He had never heard of Bai Dao before, however, judging from his mother's reaction, this Bai Dao most likely had some type of relationship with his mother. Jian Chen slowly approached his mother before asking, Mother, who is this Bai Dao person? Bai Yuntian slowly turned around, her eyes looking at her adored son, Xiang'er, Mother will tell you about this in a bit. Okay. Jian Chen nodded and did not inquire any further. Not too long after, a black-robed male came in with long strides. The man had a determined look on his face and his eyes refused to stop shining with energy. Looking at the man's forehead, many different scars could be seen. Changyang Ba stopped his actions and walked up to the center of the discussion hall. He greeted and smiled, Brother Bai Dao, I can't believe it's been 20 years since we last met. How have you been? The middle-aged man named Bai Dao greeted back and said, "I've been okay." He paused for a moment, his gaze stopping on Jian Chen and his mother, before continuing, "It's probably better if I just get straight to the point. I've come this time under the Emperor's orders. At the same time, I've come to transmit his orders." Hearing this, Chang Yanba's face became solemn as he asked, "Brother Bai Dao, could this concern Xiang'er as well?" Bai Dao nodded his head, "That's right, His Majesty has allowed your Changyang Xiang Tian to be escorted far away from Lore City. Only by doing this will the conflict between Changyang Mansion and the Huayun sect be temporarily abated." Chang Yangba furrowed his eyebrows together. In his heart, he did not want to follow along with this solution. Bai Dao continued, "The trouble this time really is a bit too great. Qing Mingxiang is Huayun sect's only son, and he's a talented person that will eventually become Huayun sect's next leader. For Changyang Xiang Tian to have cut off Qing Mingxiang's right arm destroyed him without question. Thus, the Huayun sect will definitely not let this matter drop lightly. The Huayun sect has 2 Heaven Saint Masters, people that the Changyang clan cannot afford to fight with. Although His Majesty also has 2 other Heaven Saint Masters by his side, but with trouble brewing at the borders of the country, then the Jessan Kingdom will be involved in a war soon enough. By that point, His Majesty cannot afford to get on the bad side of the Huayun sect. It is only with Changyang Xiang Tian being escorted out of Lore City and under the control of His Majesty that this situation can be solved temporarily, and fix the issues within the Jessan Kingdom. Could it be that there's really no other way? Jian Chen's second aunt, Yu Fengyan asked. None. Bai Dao shook his head, his tone filled with complete certainty. Bai Yuntian's expression turned ashen, and she said in a trembling voice, "However, the people outside are dangerous. Xiang'er's strength is still weak, he'll definitely suffer through a lot of hardships." Bai Dao gave a profound look at the Jian Chen sitting next to Bai Yuntian and said, "One must suffer hardships in their life while upholding their dignity as a person. It is only after they suffer through thick and thin that they can mature into an independent person. You both pamper him too much, this won't do him any favors, it's actually harming him." Hearing Bai Dao, a few of the gathered people nodded their heads in agreement. There was a great deal of logic within his words. Chang Yangba still looked hesitant at this idea. Jian Chen swept his gaze over his surroundings. He knew that this was his chance to strike out for an advantage and said, "Father, just let me leave. I am confident that I can cope with anything that I'll encounter in the future. Moreover, I really want to go outside to travel the world." Clan leader, since the 4th master had originally planned to leave the mansion, what Bai Dao said is correct. This may be the only way to solve the conflict between the 2 groups. With this method, the 4th master will definitely learn a lot. Even if the 4th master is a genius that surpasses others, his experience is still what matters most. Chang Bai said. Chang Yangba helplessly sighed and said, "Fine. Since Chang Bai also agrees to this suggestion, then Xiang'er will leave Lore City and experience the outside world for a while. I'll let a few devoted guards leave with Xiang'er to keep him safe outside." Once he heard that guards would be dispatched to protect him, Jian Chen's brows couldn't help but knit together as he said, "Father, there's no need to dispatch guards. I want to go adventure outside alone. Xiang'er, going out by yourself is still far too dangerous. At the very least, please take some guards to go with you in case you come across any trouble." Bai Yuntian held on to Jian Chen's hands in concern. With the current matters, she was powerless to change the decision and so she could only try to accept this decision calmly. "No need, mother. I don't want to bring guards out, if that happens, I'll be too easy to target. I think that going out alone is easier." Jian Chen's attitude was extremely firm. In reality, in his opinion, having a few guards by his side was a type of burden. In addition, once outside, he couldn't always be as cautious with conserving his strength as he was at home. He still had many secrets that he couldn't let anyone in his family know of. Chapter 67. By clan you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chanyang Ba wanted to reject Jian Chen's proposal of going alone, but Jian Chen had been adamant in his decision. So in the end, Chanyang Ba had no choice but to agree. After the discussions were over, Bai Dao said, "From what I heard in the royal palace, the Huayun sect has already received the news and is moving towards Lore City at top speed. They'll be at Lore City by late afternoon at the very latest, so it would be best if you send Chanyang Xiang Tian away from Lore City as soon as possible. Otherwise, it'll be too late by nighttime." Everyone's faces became solemn once more. Then, Chang Bai stood up and said, "Then let's have the fourth master gather his things before I take him away on the eagle beast." Soon after that, everyone started to leave the main hall. "Xiang'er, please go to mother's room, there are matters we must discuss," Bai Yuntian said as she walked towards her room. After entering her room, Bai Yuntian pulled Jian Chen with her to sit with him. By this point, Bai Yuntian's cheeks had tears streaming down her face. She knew in her heart that after Jian Chen left Changyang Mansion, it would be a very long time before the mother and son would be able to meet again. Life in the Tianyuan continent was complex, and Jian Chen didn't know what hardships he would go through or what unfortunate events would happen to him, so this was possibly the last time the mother and son would ever see each other again. "Xiang'er, you are no longer young in age and you'll soon be leaving this place. So there are things that mother should tell you first." Bai Yuntian's tears shone like sparkling crystals as they dripped from her face. "Xiang'er, didn't you ever think why it was strange that you didn't have a grandfather or grandmother?" Jian Chen nodded his head without making a sound. Bai Yuntian continued to say, "Xiang'er, your mother is actually not from the Jessen kingdom. My homelands originate from one of three biggest empires. The Karl Empire. Not only that, but my Bai clan has been a powerful family that goes back for over 1,000 years. It had a powerful influence stronger than that of the Huayun sect and resided in the king's city Minghua City. Your grandfather was a powerful saint ruler, while you have 4 other great elders who have reached the heaven saint master level and hold high positions in our Bai clan. Bai Yuntian sighed, "It's a shame good things don't last forever. While your mother was still young, your grandfather received a letter and never returned, leaving behind no information at all. 20 years after the disappearance of your grandfather, the 4 elders of the clan sent 2 people to look for him. 2 days after their search began, however, an astonishing piece of information was reported: the 2 that were sent out had been killed in the countryside." Bai Yuntian's face was full of sorrow after saying that. This piece of information was like a bolt of lightning coming from a clear sky. While the 2 elders were only at the Heaven Saint Master level, they were still considered as some of the strongest in the Tianyuan continent, so it was inconceivable to think that they could be killed. The elders didn't even have time to run, and so to this day, the Bai clan are still clueless on what enemy could be strong enough to have such a grudge towards our Bai clan. Your grandfather may have encountered something similar as well. Unfortunately, our mysterious enemies didn't even give us time to catch our breath. On the very same night of the murders, a huge group of mysterious men invaded our Bai clan. They were all very strong, and the remaining 2 elders were unable to repel them. Ultimately, they got killed. Without the powerful elders, there were no longer any strong people left to protect us. At that moment, some loyal members of the clan tried to help a group of us escape the massacre, but in the end, only your mother and uncle were left. It was only after your uncle and I hid in a family home that we were able to escape from Minghua City with our lives. After hiding for a few hours, we turned our heads and immediately left via a mercenary caravan heading towards the Jessen kingdom." The tears were still flowing from Bai Yuntian's face as she cried in deep sorrow, "Xiang'er, at that moment of greatness, we had over 1,000 members to our name. But to this day, all that remains is your uncle and the 2 of us. You must remember that you not only have the blood of the Changyang clan in you, but the blood of the Bai clan as well. You must carry on the Bai clan's name, so please remember to protect yourself. Do you understand?" Jian Chen nodded his head in silence as his heart churned with emotions. For a very long time he couldn't calm himself, since the news his mother had told him had struck the very core of his emotions. After some time, Jian Chen finally calmed himself down and said, "Mother, could it be that we still haven't figured out our mysterious enemy's identity or how strong they are?" Bai Yuntian shook her head, "I have no idea. Your mother and uncle were still young at the time and so we didn't understand much. So we had no idea who they were. If anyone knew, it would be the elders, but they're dead now." Afterwards, Bai Yuntian fished out a red embroidered pouch and looked at it as if it was bringing back old memories. "Xiang'er, before your grandfather disappeared, he gave me this red pouch and said it was a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation. By this point, it's well over 1,000 years old, so please take care of it. Those mysterious men had most likely exterminated our Bai clan for treasures like this." Jian Chen's eyes looked at the embroidered red pouch and said, "Mother, what exactly is in this then?" "There's only a small piece of fur that's smaller than the size of one's palms inside. Your mother has no idea what it's used for." Bai Yuntian placed the red pouch onto Jian Chen's hands and said, "Xiang'er, even if this pouch only has fur in it, it's still a family heirloom, so there's no way this piece of fur is not simple at all. Right now you are the Bai clan's only hope, so passing down the family heirloom should be a given. I hope you protect yourself well, but it's best if you keep this pouch hidden at all costs. Although it'll be unlikely to come across a person that recognizes it, it's better to be safe than sorry." Jian Chen silently nodded as he took the red pouch. Dong dong dong. At that moment, a knock was heard on the door as a voice called out from the other side. Quickly wiping away her tears, Bai Yuntian called out, "Who is it?" There was no sound outside the door for some time. Eventually, a voice said, "Sister, it's me." Hearing that familiar voice, one that he had not too long ago heard, Jian Chen stared blankly at the door. It was the man from the palace. Bai Dao. Hearing the voice, Bai Yuntian looked puzzled before saying, "Come in." The doors opened as a black-robed man slowly walked in. It was precisely Bai Dao. Bai Yuntian slowly stood up from her chair as she looked at him with a pained expression. "Brother, it has been 20 years since you last saw me. I had thought that you had already forgotten about me." Jian Chen's stare hardened. From the fact that his mother called him her brother, he could already tell that the middle-aged man in front of him was his uncle. "Ai." Bai Dao sighed. "Sister, I'm sorry, your older brother was wrong to not visit you during the last 20 years. In truth, your brother never forgot about you, it was just that the burdens your brother was carrying were too heavy to bear. Vengeance for our Bai clan will definitely be carried out by me. Sister. Your brother will live out the rest of his life for the sole purpose of revenge." Bai Yuntian sighed as well, before turning her head to look at Jian Chen. "Xiang'er, this is your uncle, Bai Dao." "Uncle." Jian Chen spoke. This was the first time he had uttered the word, as well as the first time he had seen him up close. Bai Dao sized up Jian Chen before offering a smile. "Xiang Tian, I have heard about you, word of your accomplishments has resounded through the capital, and have even been whispered of inside the royal palace. You are truly worthy of being a descendant of our Bai clan. I eagerly anticipate the day when you have grown strong and honorable. Do not disappoint me." After talking, Bai Dao immediately grew solemn once more as he faced Bai Yuntian. "Sister, I know you hate to see Xiang Tian leave, but there is no other way. As it stands now, the Changyang clan cannot oppose the Huayun sect, but if Xiang Tian leaves, the situation will improve dramatically for both the clan and Xiang Tian. Letting Xiang Tian stay in the mansion will bring no good benefits. It may even cause the Changyang clan to end up like our Bai clan. Right now we just need to smuggle Xiang Tian away before nightfall. Otherwise, he won't be able to leave, even if you agreed to let him go." Bai Yuntian nodded her head slowly. Since the emperor wasn't willing to help them publicly right now, how could she not understand this reasoning? Afterwards, the tear-streaked Bai Yuntian helped Jian Chen gather some clothes and items before escorting him out. As the two of them arrived at the rear courtyard, they found Jian Chen's aunts, his father, and Chang Bai were there waiting for him. Right behind them stood a gigantic and majestic eagle beast. Chang Yang, who grabbed Jian Chen's arm, his expression downtrodden as he spoke with concern, "Fourth brother, you'd better be careful in the outside world, understand?" Jian Chen nodded before saying with a smile, "Don't worry big brother, I will definitely protect myself. But after I go, you'd better not goof off. You must continue practicing the battle techniques." Chang Yang, who nodded his head fiercely and said, "I will, fourth brother. Your elder brother's lack of strength has burdened you. From now on, I will strive even harder to cultivate and grow stronger." Jian Chen's second sister, Changyang Mingyue, walked up to him and gave him a spice bag. "Fourth brother, your second sister made you a safety charms and wishes you safe travels. You'd better wear it." Right now, Changyang Mingyue was already 18. She had become a tall yet slender beautiful girl that was capable of causing an entire city to fight for her. Jian Chen took the safety charm from her. Although he knew that the charm wouldn't provide any substantial amount of defense, it was still a gift from his sister that was filled with concern. "Thank you, second sister. I will definitely take care of this charm," he said with a smile. Changyang Ba walked forward with a ring and spoke, "Xiang'er, this is a space ring your father had long since prepared for you. This was meant to be your graduation present from Kargath Academy, but I don't believe you need to wait that long for it anymore. Your father will give you this space ring, there is already something I have prepared for you inside." "Thank you, father." With a grateful look, Jian Chen took the space ring. "Xiang'er, the space ring is absolutely a precious item within the Tian Yuan continent. In order to avoid unnecessary troubles, don't reveal your space ring to anyone, even under the most dire circumstances," Changyang Ba said. Jian Chen nodded, "Father, Xiang'er understands." Chapter 68. White Cloud City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After everyone had finished talking, Jian Chen left with Chang Bai on the back of the eagle beast and immediately departed from Lore City. Sitting on top of the eagle beast, Jian Chen stared at the receding city walls with a complicated look on his face. It's been over 15 years since he came into this world, and he has only left the confines of the mansion and Lore City twice. The first time he had left Lore City was to go to Kargath Academy, but this time, the reason was no longer the same. Jian Chen understood that after leaving, he wouldn't see his family again for a very long time, and would have to fend for himself. In this dangerous environment known as the Tian Yuan continent, Jian Chen could only rely on himself. Jian Chen personally didn't think he would be able to see his family again, but he had read from the books that this world was dominated by the strong. The Tian Yuan continent was a lot more dangerous than his previous world, and while he had decent strength for his age, there was no guarantee for what may happen. Chang Bai sat on the neck of the eagle beast and stared at Jian Chen. "Fourth master, starting from today you'll be on your own. Please be careful as you travel through the Tian Yuan continent." "I know what must be done, Chang Bai," Jian Chen said without turning his head. Chang Bai paused to look at Jian Chen with a curious look before sighing as he had no more to say. The eagle beast flew high in the sky, thousands of meters above the ground, streaking across the sky like a ray of light. With the whistle of the wind blowing loudly, both Chang Bai and Jian Chen had their hair and clothes flapping rapidly in the wind. The eagle beast soared over the walls of countless tiny villages before finally the eagle beast slowly came to a stop, in midair in front of the walls of a great city. Looking down to see the city, Jian Chen asked, "Chang Bai, you should just drop me off here." Hearing this, Chang Bai looked down to see the tiny city before nodding his head, "If you say so." Immediately, the eagle beast flew down towards the ground under his control. Jian Chen hopped off of the magical beast before saying to Chang Bai, "Chang Bai, you should hurry on home, I'm sure the Huayun sect has already arrived at the Changyang mansion." Chang Bai started to ascend with his eagle beast. "Fourth master, please take care." Jian Chen waved goodbye to Chang Bai and turned around to walk towards the city in front of him. Chang Bai hesitated as he sat on the eagle beast and watched Jian Chen's back go further and further away. It was only after he had disappeared when Chang Bai said, "Fourth Master, I hope we see each other soon, you've always surprised me after all." The eagle beast started to flap its wings and flew into the sky, blowing dust everywhere. Soon, Chang Bai flew off into the air towards the direction of the Changyang mansion. The sun has already long since set into the horizon. With the colors of nightfall rapidly approaching, Jian Chen walked towards the small city with a group of people. However, while he was walking on foot, many of them were traveling via carriages being pulled by magical beasts. Jian Chen's appearance had naturally made the other travelers curious and made many other mercenaries become alert. But when they realized how young Jian Chen was, they immediately lost their alertness. Jian Chen sized up the mercenaries riding on top of the magical beasts. Some of them ranged from 20 years old to 50 years old, some wore armor, some leather, and some just wore regular clothes. When Jian Chen walked closer to them, however, he could smell the scent of blood. To the experienced Jian Chen, he knew that these mercenaries had been baptized with the blood of their enemies already. 10 miles wasn't that far for Jian Chen, and so after some time, he saw the 20-meter-high city walls. Jian Chen didn't know how old the walls were, but the constant battle with time seemed to have left its mark on them. Visible scars could be seen on the walls, but near the gate written with bold calligraphy were the words, "White Cloud City." "Hey, halt! What is your purpose here?" Barring Jian Chen's path was a guard of the city. Jian Chen gave a small smile and handed the guard a few gold coins and said, "Brother, I am merely a mercenary who came to White Cloud City for a mission." The guard took the gold coins discreetly and smiled brightly at him. "Ah, so you have a mission, then I won't take up your precious time, go on in." After entering the city, Jian Chen walked 3 kilometers down the road, and arrived at a very busy part of the city. Although it was sunset, the street was still bustling with people rushing around from store to store and engaged in every sort of business. The streets were paved with rocks that seemed to shine brightly. With the road so evenly paved, even if a caravan ran full speed across it, the passengers wouldn't feel the slightest jolt. Hungry, Jian Chen rubbed his stomach gingerly as he walked towards the nearest restaurant. It had already been a full day since he had eaten, so his stomach had already started to protest. "Welcome, guest." Under the enthusiastic welcome of a waiter, Jian Chen walked towards an empty table and sat down. "Honored guest, are you here for a meal or to stay for the night?" The waiter was a young man in his 20s, and had a cordial smile on his face. Jian Chen looked at the other rowdy mercenaries within the restaurant and said, "Even those who are staying for the night require a meal, what is there to eat here?" The waiter smiled and introduced Jian Chen to a wide variety of dishes. However, every single one of the dishes mentioned were all the most expensive dishes. The waiter had long since noticed Jian Chen was wearing quite luxurious clothes and thought him out to be the son of a wealthy clan. But Jian Chen didn't care for the prices of the dishes and instead lazily chose one out to eat. After eating his fill, Jian Chen paid for a medium-sized room for the night and immediately entered his room to rest. The restaurant was not a very high-quality one, so the medium-sized room was not too luxurious. Compared to the Changyang mansion, the difference was like comparing the heavens to the earth. The room offered a hardwood bed with a single table and a few chairs, but apart from that, there was nothing more. On a side note, the room had been cleaned nicely. Jian Chen had never been picky, and so this room had already satisfied him enough. After closing his door, Jian Chen walked towards his bed and took out the space ring his father had given him before leaving and looked at the contents. The space ring deserved to be called a high-quality treasure as there were many objects within it. With an internal storage of up to 100 cubic meters, there were a pile of items stacked in the middle of it. While the ring wasn't full, almost every inch of the floor had been covered by items. Amongst a pile of items, there were 1,000 purple coins that sparkled dazzlingly along with another few thousand gold coins stacked in another pile. There were even small piles of monster cores. Around 40 of them were Class 2 monster cores, 10 of them were Class 3 monster cores, and only one of them was a Class 4 monster core. Seeing how many items were stored inside the space ring, Jian Chen felt very warm inside. Although it wasn't by any means a large amount of items, they all served a practical use for Jian Chen's needs. With this much, it truly showed how much Changyang Ba cared for his son. Stuffing the space ring back into his bosom, Jian Chen clearly remembered the words of his father. Until he was strong enough, he didn't dare to reveal his ring to anyone since it was such a precious item on the Tianyuan continent. Although there weren't a small amount of people who had a space ring, they were all strong members of influential and wealthy clans and could easily protect themselves from danger. Climbing onto the bed, Jian Chen took a few monster cores from within the space ring and closed his eyes as he started to cultivate using the energy from within the monster cores. As usual, Jian Chen started to absorb the energy within the monster core at a frightening rate. If anyone were to see him now, then they would see the monster core emit a weak amount of light as the energy within started to flow into him like a thick stream. To the naked eye, the energy was surrounding Jian Chen's body while the monster core was rapidly shrinking in Jian Chen's hands. Ever since Jian Chen had broken through to become a saint, there was an unfathomable mystery in his dantian in the form of an azure and violet glow. Because of that, his path of cultivation had become much more difficult than before, and although his absorption rate of the world essence was several times faster than before, he could only absorb a pathetic 1% of it all. The rest of it was being taken by his dantian. So for now he would have to absorb the energy from the monster cores, but if he kept this up, he wouldn't be able to keep up with the consumption rate. After 2 hours, Jian Chen had already absorbed a lot of the energy within the monster cores, but Jian Chen continued to take monster core after monster core out of his space ring and continued to cultivate. He still had plenty of Class 1 monster cores and a few Class 2 monster cores which would last him a couple of days at the very least. Fortunately, his father had also gave him 10 Class 3 monster cores and a single Class 4 monster core. On the second day, the sun had already reached a high point in the sky before Jian Chen finally finished cultivating. By this point, all of his Class 1 monster cores were essentially gone. AI. After realizing the dwindling amount of monster cores in his space belt, Jian Chen gave a long sigh of hopelessness. The 2 glows within his dantian had really made him feel quite distressed. Calming himself, Jian Chen departed from both his room and the restaurant to mingle with the crowded streets. The morning sky was quite clear, and the fiery sun had not yet started to increase the temperature of the weather by a large amount. With a warm ray of light, everyone felt quite comfortable instead. On the busy streets, a few mercenaries were hurrying along while a few peddlers were slowly cruising along. Jian Chen eventually arrived at the mercenary union. He had already put in some thought about which job he wanted to take, so he would first need to become a mercenary. Chapter 69. First Class Mercenary. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Throughout the Tianyuan continent, in each city of every country, the mercenary union would always be in the core of the city. And right next to the mercenary union would always be a few small banks. White Cloud City was only a second-class city, but it covered a large area of land. Jian Chen had walked for an entire 30 minutes before finally arriving at a bustling street at the center of the city. Right in front of him was a 20-meter-tall building that towered over the other buildings. This was the mercenary union. The mercenary union's building was rather large and was constructed to resemble a giant magical beast. At the entrance of the building, a constant flow of all sorts of mercenaries went in and out. Jian Chen entered the mercenary union, and although this was the first time he had been to a place like this. However, since he had wanted to become an experienced mercenary, he had read up on about stuff like this in the academy library. The mercenary union had many people inside, and the business window had a long queuing line. All of the sales windows were filled with people trying to hand in their missions. Yet in the deepest part of the building, there was a mercenary enrollment window with a cold and desolate ambience. Jian Chen walked up to that window and said, "Hello, I would like to enlist as a mercenary. The person in charge of this window was an old man who looked to be around 60 years old. Although he was old, his entire face was red and his eyes shined brightly with emotion. The elderly man indifferently looked at Jian Chen and flatly said, "To become a mercenary, one first must be a saint. Have you reached that level yet?" "I have already reached the saint level," Jian Chen answered. The elder sized Jian Chen up before handing over a piece of paper and asking, "What's your name?" "Jian Chen." Jian Chen obviously didn't want to use the name Changyang Xiang Tian when he was trying to hide himself, so he instead used his original name from his previous life as his new moniker. "How old are you this year?" the man asked. Hearing this, Jian Chen gave the question some thought. 20 years old. Jian Chen couldn't possibly state his true age since a saint at the age of 15 was a very rare sight in the Tian Yuan continent. If he had stated his true age it might have brought forth trouble later that he did not need. Although many people knew how talented Jian Chen was in Kargath Academy, only a few people like the headmaster and the vice-headmaster knew his true age. A 20-year-old was the normal age for one to be a saint, and since his physical growth had long since outstripped the others, no one would think otherwise if he said he was 20. With his current appearance, there was almost no difference between a regular 20-year-old and himself. "What degree of strength have you reached?" The man began to write on the piece of paper with a pen. "Primary saint," Jian Chen said. The rest of the process to become a mercenary was rather simple. After paying the tax of 1 silver coin, Jian Chen had officially become a mercenary. He took his mercenary badge, which was that of the lowest rank since he was only a primary saint. After collecting his badge, Jian Chen didn't bother to stay behind at the mercenary union, he instead quickly left the building, and asked for directions to a medicine shop. Although the Tian Yuan continent had radiant saint masters who could heal a wide variety of injuries, their numbers were incredibly small. Because of this, the status of any single radiant saint master was very high, especially for mercenaries, who would be hard-pressed to be able to invite a radiant saint master into their group. Only the biggest and strongest groups could successfully invite one. Those who were alone or weren't strong enough would find it impossible to enjoy the benefits a radiant saint master would bring unless they paid extensive amounts of money. With an uncountable amount of mercenaries on the Tian Yuan continent, there were also an equally uncountable amount of injured people every day. Since the supply of radiant saint masters did not meet the demand of those who needed them, a new method of using drugs and herbs was created to combat injuries. Using these medicines was vastly inferior to the healing capabilities of a radiant saint master, but it was widely accepted by mercenaries. This was because aside from the high-grade drugs, the normal medicines were very cheap. The medicine store wasn't small and was crowded inside. It was not at all like the mercenary union which had soundproofed walls all around. While in the mercenary union, all of the mercenaries there would loudly shout amongst each other to be heard. In the medicine store, people could easily converse with each other. The medicine store had many long lines of people. After sweeping a glance around the shop, Jian Chen finally found a line with relatively few people and waited. "Might I ask what you want to order?" Finally it was Jian Chen's turn. He was enthusiastically greeted by the person behind the counter. "I'll need a few herbs, do you have them in stock?" Jian Chen asked. The assistant looked at Jian Chen with an odd stare. This was the first time he had seen a person not come in to buy medicine for their wounds, instead, this person was buying herbs. Despite the curiosity he had towards Jian Chen, the assistant replied, "Of course we sell them. I don't know what the honored customer wants, but whatever is in the store is for sale. I need some Chilan grass, rubbing grass, sweet grass, skeleton grass, sawtooth grass, antelope flower, root flower, lilies and turtle tubers. Do you have these?" Jian Chen named almost 10 different types of herbs. The assistant immediately nodded, "We do, these herbs are very common and are not pricey at all. We have them all, but I don't know how much the honored customer wants." Jian Chen had a happy smile on his face. He took out a gold coin and placed it onto the counter as he said, "Give me a few of every item." These herbs were all extremely common goods, a single gold coin was enough to buy a cartful of them. Seeing the gold coin on the counter, the man smiled brightly, "Okay, please wait for one moment, honored guest. I'll bring them to you in a moment." With that said, he entered the back room to gather the materials. After paying for the herbs he needed, Jian Chen left the store and headed outside of the city. He arrived 10 miles outside of the city walls, and entered into the small forest. There, he dug a few mounds of earth and plucked some tree leaves. He then stored them within his space belt and walked back to White Cloud City. After returning to White Cloud City, Jian Chen purchased a new set of ordinary clothes and ducked into an uninhabited alleyway that was hidden by the general populace. After looking left and right to check if the coast was clear, he took out a small bunch of each herb he had bought earlier. He first grinded the herbs up into a fine powder using his hands and feet, before mixing it with the water he collected. Adding to the mixture some of the soft mud and leaves, he grinded it into powder as well. He continued to mix it before squeezing out some of the residual juice. Jian Chen took the result of this juice and immediately smeared it onto his face. Quickly, Jian Chen lifted his head, the complete transformation of his face could clearly be seen. At this moment, Jian Chen's looked entirely different. Even a person who was familiar with his appearance wouldn't be able to recognize him now. For all intents and purposes, Jian Chen was now a completely different person. His previously handsome looks had become average, and even his eyebrows and eyelashes had been altered to become shorter. The only features that hadn't changed were his pair of alluring eyes and his weak-looking figure. Jian Chen didn't stop there, the silver light wind sword appeared in his hands. He suddenly placed the sword on the back of his waist as his waist-length hair blowing slightly into the air. With a silver flash of light, the light wind sword quickly cut through his long hair with a speed that was almost hard to see with the naked eye. His hair was now at his shoulders. He changed into a new set of clothes from his previously luxurious set of clothes made from hand-spun silk. It was quite the change going from the finest silk to coarse leather. By this point, there was nothing about Jian Chen that would remind even those who knew him best of the original Jian Chen. Jian Chen took another few moments to ensure he hadn't overlooked anything to perfect his new appearance. Satisfied, he immediately burned his old clothes in a fire and exited the alley. Once again entering the mercenary union, Jian Chen walked towards the mission place. The mission hall in the mercenary union split its missions into 5 grades. S, A, B, C, and D. The highest grade was S, and the lowest was D. At the same time, the mercenaries were also split into these same 5 categories. At the moment, Jian Chen was only a D-ranked mercenary, and so he could only take on D-ranked missions. A mercenary's rank was determined by the amount of missions accomplished, their honor and strength. D-ranked mercenaries had to be at least saints, while C-ranked mercenaries had the power of great saints at the very minimum. With this system, S-ranked mercenaries had to reach the strength and honor of Earth Saint Masters. Even if one had the same strength as an Earth Saint Master, if they didn't have the same amount of reputation, then they wouldn't be considered an S-ranked mercenary. Therefore, this mercenary grading system had no shortcuts. D-ranked missions were bountiful, but the majority of them were very boring. The majority of them were about finding lost items, or to help a store buy and deliver their items to another store. None of the missions were of any interest to Jian Chen. Right now, Jian Chen only wanted a mission that would let him leave the Jessan Kingdom because he knew the Huayun sect was a major power in the kingdom. Although he had completely changed his looks, there was no guarantee that a person wouldn't discover his real identity and set off the Huayun sect's pursuit to capture him. Just in case he accidentally revealed himself to the Huayun sect by mistake, it would be best for him to leave the Jessan Kingdom to a place where the Huayun sect had no power. Unfortunately, very few D-ranked missions allowed a mercenary to travel in between countries. Most missions like that were for the higher-ranked mercenaries and were usually never distributed to a D-ranker. So when Jian Chen had looked at the entire mission list for D-ranking mercenaries, he didn't see a single mission that would take him outside the country. Inwardly sighing, Jian Chen left the mercenary union. If he wanted to leave the Jessan kingdom, he would need to rely on the cover of caravans. Otherwise, if he were to travel alone, he would be assaulted by a group of robbers that even he would most likely have trouble with. But even if he didn't meet any robbers, the border fortress was a place Jian Chen wouldn't be able to bypass with ease. Chapter 70. Leaving Jessan Kingdom. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After leaving the mercenary union, Jian Chen walked towards the marketplace. With such a wide variety of goods being displayed, there was an equal variety of armed forces guarding it as people traded. With their presence, no one feared having their wares stolen. But when Jian Chen arrived, there were already people busily trading while others were streaming in and out of the area. All sorts of magical beasts were being ridden by the guards, though some of them were just regular horses. Horses were very common in the Tianyuan continent, but while they were the most common type of transportation, they were also the most mundane. At that moment, a peddler walked by Jian Chen's side with an armload of goods. Holding out his hand, Jian Chen asked the peddler, "Fellow brother, might I ask if you know of any traders leaving the Jessan kingdom?" The trader looked at Jian Chen with suspicion before pointing towards a big caravan. "That caravan is preparing to leave the Jessan kingdom." Jian Chen followed the youth's finger with his eye and saw 10 caravans grouped together. Surrounding the caravans was a large group of mercenaries protecting the items, while a middle-aged man wearing a luxurious-looking robe was commanding the people to load up the items onto the caravan. With only a single glance, Jian Chen knew that this middle-aged man was the one responsible for the caravans. Immediately walking on over, he asked the man, "Uncle, might I ask if your caravans are leaving Jessan kingdom?" Hearing Jian Chen, the middle-aged man turned around to take a look at him. "Why do you ask?" Laughing, Jian Chen said, "Uncle, if your caravans are leaving Jessan kingdom, might I join you? Although my strength is not all that strong, I am still a mercenary nonetheless. I don't need a reward for this either, how about it?" The middle-aged man looked relieved at Jian Chen's last sentence and said, "Fine. However, you must stick close to us during the trip. Also, any roadside fares must be paid by you and won't be compensated for by us. Lastly, if we are attacked, then you must help protect the group and fight together with us." On the Tianyuan continent, most of the weaker mercenaries would usually either form their own large group, or join a caravan group in order to travel from kingdom to kingdom. Since the roads connecting the kingdoms were long and dangerous, there was a very high chance of encountering highwaymen. Ambushes from magical beasts were also a common occurrence, and in some areas, those attacks happened frequently. Because of this, every caravan would welcome a mercenary's presence with wide arms, and generally wouldn't refuse anyone. After all, even one man could add to the overall strength, and could help protect someone's life. Jian Chen didn't hesitate at all to agree to the man's conditions. "Our caravan will depart in an hour, so go make your preparations." With that said, the man didn't pay any more attention to Jian Chen and resumed commanding the transporters to work. Afterwards, Jian Chen headed towards the White Cloud City stables and spent 50 gold coins to buy a single horse. Leading the horse back, he patiently waited for the caravan to depart. An hour quickly passed as Jian Chen mounted his horse and followed the caravans from behind. The mercenaries that were originally hired to protect the caravan sent many inquisitive looks at him, but none bothered to talk to him. Since there were 3 caravan groups that combined into one, there were naturally 3 groups of mercenaries. Aside from those 3 groups, there were also many mercenaries going by themselves. It was because of the unknown dangers that the caravans had to group together both themselves and their mercenaries, resulting in a total of about 500 people. It was even normal for one to recognize a familiar face. Soon they left the city gates. Although the caravan representative had a few bodyguards and mercenaries, he didn't stay at the gates for long, and immediately ordered the caravans to move out once the negotiations were over. One moment. At that moment, before everyone could move, an armored man came down from the city towers with a scroll of paper. The middle-aged man crossed the city gates and handed the scroll to one of the bodyguards. "Take this portrait and stick it to the city gates. Then find the best portrait master and send him to me. I want him to duplicate this portrait and post it everywhere in the city. If anyone can find the person described on the portrait, capture him, and if there's any resistance, kill him." "Yes, sir." A soldier took the scroll and immediately tacked it to the city wall. The picture on the portrait is a wanted criminal in the Jessan Kingdom. Take a good look now, look for this person in every single city you stop at. By all means, you must not let the criminal get away. Do you understand? The man repeated with a commanding tone that could be heard clearly even from far away. As the bodyguard posted the portrait onto the city gates, everyone glanced at the figure on it. The person looked to be no younger than 16 years old, and no older than 20. Although the person looked very young, his looks were handsome and actually looked very lifelike despite it being a drawing. Whoever had drawn this portrait was a true master of art. After posting the portrait, the man waved his arm at the caravan representative. "That'll be all, you can leave now." With no further interruptions, the caravan began to move once more. However, the guards at the city gates had already went from 10 in number to 100. Every single one of them would check each person as they entered or exited the gates, and then compared them to the person in the portrait. When Jian Chen was about to exit the gates, he saw the portrait on the gates, and his eyes hardened. The person on the portrait was of his original appearance. Seeing this, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel some fear in his heart regarding the Huayuan sect. This city had been countless of miles away from Lore City. He had only left Lore City yesterday and arrived at White Cloud City just last night. Yet not only did the Huayuan sect perfectly capture his appearance onto a portrait, but they had also been able to quickly send out the portraits to a city thousands of miles away. This type of efficiency make any person quake in fear, and Jian Chen doubted that the Huayuan sect had only sent out portraits to White Cloud City. Right now, he feared almost every single city within the Jessan Kingdom had warrants of his capture. Jian Chen secretly rejoiced at his decision to change his appearance, otherwise, he would have been hard-pressed to escape White Cloud City. As Jian Chen rode his horse forward, the two soldiers at the gates scrutinized him with a heavy stare. However, Jian Chen had already changed his appearance. He was completely different from before. If people who had been familiar with him wouldn't be able to recognize him, then how would some strangers be able to find out who he was? With no more hindrances, Jian Chen mixed in with the other mercenaries and departed from White Cloud City in a long line. The final destination for the three caravans was the neighboring country, Blue Wind Kingdom. But because the caravans had many precious goods in them, they were going at a slow pace. Although the border fort wasn't too far away, it would take them 2 or 3 days of walking to reach the border, and crossing into the Blue Wind Kingdom would require another half-month. Jian Chen looked at the grand caravan. It wasn't using regular horses to pull, but rather 4 Class 1 magical beasts specially bred for this purpose. Surrounding the magical beasts were a few mercenaries riding on top of their own magical beasts. None of them looked weak at all. The man Jian Chen had talked to earlier was there as well. It seemed that all of them were protecting the caravan as well. Jian Chen had quietly figured out that within the middle caravan was the boss, if not an important person. This was because this was a luxurious caravan, and still had 2 other caravans by its side. It took around 4 days for the group of caravans to reach the border fort, which was a long wall that spanned for countless of miles. It was 50 meters tall and 20 meters thick. From afar, this great wall looked like a long dragon that made people shake in awe. Jian Chen looked at the wall in front of him as the shade covered him. Under the protection of the wall, the setting sun was completely blocked, and the area in front of the wall was completely covered in darkness. This sight was enough to make people who had never seen this sight before shake in awe, as they felt like the wall was some frightening and profound force. This was the first time Jian Chen had ever seen the Jessan Kingdom's wall. There was awe in Jian Chen's mind as he looked. In his previous world, he had seen many walls, but none of them could compare to this. The biggest wall he had seen was 20 meters tall, but this wall in front of him was 50 meters tall. It was like comparing an adult to a child. What a great wall! I can't even imagine how long it took for them to build a wall of this size. Jian Chen sighed in admiration. Hearing what he said, the mercenary riding right next to Jian Chen stifled his laughter. A wall of this size is normal in the Tianyuan continent. Practically every kingdom has a wall of this caliber. The mercenary looked at Jian Chen and said, if you haven't been to any of the three great empires, then let me tell you. Each one of the walls have a height of at least 100 meters and a thickness of 50 meters. These small city walls can't even compare. Jian Chen turned around to look at the mercenary who spoke to him. He looked to be around 20 years old and had a suntanned face. With his coarse leather clothes, the man looked to be quite ordinary. When there's a chance, I'll definitely go check out the three great empires. Jian Chen laughed. The roads connecting the three great empires are quite long and dangerous. At the same time, magical beasts run rampant there, so it's not that easy to travel in between the empires. The mercenary said.